What I want to talk to you about today, whoa, he come off. Ha, he come off. What I want to talk to you today is 5 lures and 5 techniques to break down open water bass fishing. Open water, cold water bass fishing. Early in the year, I spend a lot of my time in very open water to catch my fish. And I want to give you about 5 different ways that I try to catch the fish. And one of them is a jerkbait. And he come off. That fish came off. Isn't that something? 2 in a row that I've lost. One of them is a jerkbait, and it's one of the very best baits that you can use to catch your fish early in the year. And what I like to do on a jerkbait is, it depends on the open water. If I've got water that's got grass, I'm going to get over the top of the grass, and I'm really looking for areas in the grass that are bare. In other words, where I've got little patches that for some reason there's no grass growing. It's bare grass. And in those kind of areas, that's usually where I'll find the largest concentrations of fish. And I like to catch them on a jerkbait. I like to catch them on a crankbait, or even throwing a jig in there. Now there's 5 baits that I'm going to talk to you about today, and they'll be doing a lot of different deals. Now I'm not sure we can catch a fish on all 5 baits. Obviously we can catch them on a jerkbait. Well, we can hook them on a jerkbait. I don't know if we can catch one on a jerkbait or not. I've hooked 2 and lost them both. But open water is where you want to catch your fish early in the year. Now there are other baits that work good. I just want to concentrate on 5 that I really like, because these baits will really catch them. Hopefully we can catch a fish, you know, maybe catch a fish on 2 or 3 of those baits today. Anyway, and a jerkbait is one of them. We're going to try it for a while and see what happens. I had 2 fish right off the bat. I mean, kind of amazing. 2 fish right off the bat. There's one. Slowed that bait down a little bit. It's a pretty good fish. I thought he was a lot smaller than that. Pretty nice fish. Oh, yeah. Let's see if that baby comes unbuttoned or come in. That's a pretty nice fish right there. He's a lot bigger than I thought he was. He didn't know he was caught there for a while, I think. I don't think he knew he was caught. I've got 10-pound test line on here. One of the things you want to think about if you're going to catch fish on a jerkbait, this is an RC Sticks Lucky Strike bait. And one of the things you want to think about if you're going to catch fish on a jerkbait is the colder the water, the lighter the line. This water's up about 50 degrees right now. It's 49 when I started this morning. It's a little bit over 50 right now. I have to have some needle nose. You got to have needle nose if you're going to fish jerkbaits. That's for sure. That's a really nice bass right there. A really, really nice fish. Got 2 of them out of him. And you're going to carry some extra hooks, so you want to make sure you get you some good jerkbait hooks at Bass Pro. It's got great hooks in there, but what's going to happen once you catch quite a few fish, especially unhooking them on the jerkbaits? That's a nice bass right there. Look at the belly on that booger. Will you look at that? But the colder the water, the lighter the line. Colder the water, the lighter the line. That's one of the things to remember on a jerkbait. And when the water's really, really cold, when I first start jerkbaiting, I'll use 6 or 8 pound test line. 6 is as low as I'll go to. Some of the guys will go to even lower than that, but 6 or 8 pound test line. You normally will get a lot more bites on 6 pound test line than you will on 8. As the water begins to warm up, you can move to a little bit heavier line. I'd probably be a little bit better off if I had 8 on here right now instead of 10. This rod just happened to have 10 on it, and that's what I'm throwing on here. But the jerkbait, the cool thing you got to remember about a jerkbait is the majority of the fish you catch are going to hit when that bait is stopped, when it's just sitting there, not moving at all. So what you want to do is you're going to pull that jerkbait down like I've done right here, enter in this open water, stop it, let it sit there. You want to use a suspended crankbait or jerkbait early in the year. You want to use a suspended jerkbait early in the year. As the water gets warmer in the summertime, you can use a floating jerkbait that floats back up to the top. But early in the year, you want to use one that suspends. So when you stop that bait, it's going to stay right there. It's not going to float back up to the top. And most of the bites are going to come when it's stopped. Now let me tell you, one of the key things is to let that bait sit there as long as you possibly can. That bass will come up and he'll look at that bait sitting there. You throw that bait out, jerk it down a little bit, give 4 or 5 hard jerks, and stop. Let it sit there just about as long as you possibly can stand it. And then let it sit there a little bit more. Give it a jerk or 2. Not big jerks with your rod tip. You see what I'm doing right there? Just barely moving that rod tip. Barely, just moving it. And then I'm also moving my rod tip back toward it. That's one of the key things in catching fish on a jerk bait early in the year, is don't let that bait slide in the water. When you jerk it, give it a little jerk, stop it, move your rod tip back toward it so it's sitting there on a loose line. It's not moving, it's just simply sitting there. A lot of times those big bass come up and they're sitting there looking at it, it's sitting there, and when you move it one more time, that's when they'll grab it. So leave the bait set as long as you possibly can. Sometimes really long pauses is the key things in catching fish on a jerkbait. Let me tell you what I'm looking for on jerkbait fish, and what you're looking for depends on the type of lake you've got. If you've got a lake that's got a lot of grass, you're really probably going to be able to find the fish on flats. But what you're looking for is you're looking for areas where the fish are going to go early in the year before they go back to spawn. So you want to find places where you've got maybe a bay going back in there like that, a bay going back in there like that, a bay going back in there like that, and get out in front of those bays. That's the first place those fish are going to go to. Now, if you've got grass, you can get on the big flats. If you just got a bank down there, you might take a bank that's right in between two pockets that go back in if the fish are going to go back in and spawn. Now, everybody fishes the points. I mean, you've heard that all your life, and that's a good thing to do. One of the things to do on a lake you don't know very much about is just go fish points. Go from point to point to point to point to point. But the problem is everybody fishes the points. So fish some of the banks between the points. So you got a good bay going in, a good bay going in, fish the bank in between those two bays. And you can get out, and honestly with these jerk baits, you can get out and you're fishing over water that's maybe 20, 30 feet deep, and your bait's going down 7, 8, 9, 10 foot, lighter line, the deeper it's going to go. And those fish are coming up and getting that bait, and you can catch a lot of those big fish in open water in that time of the year. So that's what you're looking for, is you're looking for those type areas where the fish are going to be before they go spawn in a cold open water. Going to do actually the same thing with a spinnerbait. Spinnerbait, those are two baits that I'm going to be doing that exact same thing with right there. So this is exactly what we're doing. Speaking of spinnerbaits, let's pick a spinnerbait up and throw it a little bit. We caught a few fish there. Lost a couple, but we caught a few fish on that bait. Let's pick a spinnerbait up because this is another bait. Early in the year like this, I'm going to use a shad color bait. I got a solid white on here, shad color bait of some kind, chartreuse, chartreuse and white. And mostly what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a round blade more than I use a willow leaf blade because of the vibration. And I'm going to just slow roll that bait. I want to slow roll the bait over whatever I've got the fish by. If I've got trees, I want to slow roll around the trees. If I got brush piles, slow roll around that. If I've got bridge pilings or rocks, I'm going to slow roll around that. But I'm looking for the same type situation. I'm looking for a place where the bass are going to be getting ready to go spawn. The area, it's a pre-spawn area. You've heard of pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. I'm talking about a pre-spawn areas. The areas that I'm wanting to find in open water, in cold water situations, is the areas where the fish are going to be before they go into the pre-spawn. Water temperature was 49 degrees, and it's raised up to, well, now I'm back out where it's 49 again. Up there when it's protected, it's a nice fish. You know Jimmy, what do you do, Jimmy, when you don't, that's one of a nice fish, that's a big fish. What do you do, Jimmy, when you can't catch them? Oh, man, that's a beauty. That is a beauty. And so what did I do? What do you do, Jimmy? You tie a Jimmy Houston Legend spinnerbait on with round blades. Another one. Got that bait down a little deeper there. Boy, they're nice fish. I promise you. One thing about fishing early in the year when it's cold like this, you can catch some nice fish when the water's cold. We got a pretty nice day out here. It's in the 40s. Get up in the 60s. Oh, man. Way to break a rod, Jimmy. Oh, you there, caught that one outside the mouth. Looky there, caught him outside the mouth. Almost got him in the eye, but not quite. Ooh, that's a nice one too. Boy, that's a gorgeous fish right there. Yeah. Whoa, Jimmy, have you figured out something? There he is. Spinnerbait. Slow rolling that spinnerbait. That's one of the key things in open water. A lot of times it's just a matter of drifting across flats, trying to find little variations in the bottom. Well, that acts like a good fish. Little variations in the bottom that can really produce. Oh, he's not a giant, he's just strong. He's not a giant. He thinks he's a giant. And a white bass? No, it's a largemouth. It's a pretty nice fish. He's hooked outside the mouth a little bit. That made him a little bit stronger. That's 2 fish that I've caught outside the mouth. Well, spinnerbait, you're going to catch up with the jig. All I'm doing right now is I got out on a big flat. This is one of the things you got to do. You get on a big flat and just kind of looking for random fish. I hadn't had a bite on that spinnerbait after I got out of those trees, and I caught 2 and close together, and I couldn't catch any more. So one of the things you want to do if you're going to try to break down open water is fish as many different types of open water as you can find. And you're looking for really, most of the time, relatively small variances in the bottom. Might be pieces of grass, it might be open spots, might be brush piles, might be road beds or something on the bottom. Things on the bottom, and a lot of times you don't ever notice them on your electronics till after you caught a fish off of them. So when you catch a fish, pay attention to where you caught it and go over and look at that spot where that fish bit and see if you got some grass over there, a brush pile, or maybe a bridge, or there's going to be all kinds of things, you know. What holds fish in open water is the same thing that holds fish up against the bank that you can see. Is it important on a spinnerbait, when you're using tandem blades like most of us use nowadays? I use a lot of single spins myself. I take a lot of the baits and actually cut the inside blade off. But is it important if you have the gold blade or the nickel blade out on the end? Which is it? Which is better, gold blade or nickel blade out on the end? Well, to be totally honest with you, it probably doesn't make much difference at all. On this particular bait right here, which I've been catching quite a few fish on today, I've got the nickel out on the end and the gold on the inside. Probably makes no difference at all. Historically, I've always put the gold on the end, the little nickel kicker blade on the inside. What's more important is the shape of the blades and the size of the blades. You got to remember in spinnerbait fishing that round blades create a lot more vibration. So if you want a lot of vibration, you want to go with round blades. You throw a round blade, you can notice your fish thump, 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 thump right on the end of your rod tip, and that's exactly what you want. The bigger the blade, the more thump you're going to get. So if you're trying to really fish and get a lot of thump, a lot of vibration, you're trying to get fish to move a long way to come and get your bait, you want to use a bigger blade. Earlier in the year when I'm catching big fish, I like big blades. Late in the year, in the fall, I like to use big blades when I'm fishing around rocks and ripraps and things like that. Something that creates a lot of vibration. In muddy water, I like to use round blades, something that causes a lot of vibration. In the middle of the year, in the summertime, when the shad's spawning, then you can go to your long, slender, willow leaf blades that provide a lot of flash, but not very much vibration. As far as the situation on the gold and nickel, probably makes not much difference at all. But the main thing is just get something that's comfortable to you, something that you got some real confidence in. But if you're looking for vibration, which to be honest with you, I'm looking for vibration more than I am anything else in the spinnerbait. Vibration is important, very, very important. And the size of the blade, the bigger the blade, generally, the bigger the bass. Good luck out there with your spinnerbaits. Doesn't really matter the color of the blades. What I'm looking for when I've got a jig on, and I just got a half-ounce Lucky Strike jig on there now, and I usually put some sort of a creature bait on it or a crawl bait on it in the cold water like this. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for little small areas that are around trees or rocks or things that are different from the surrounding deals. And what I've got right here, this is almost probably like a little field or something right in the middle of a bunch of trees. And I'm just going to fish the edges of that. I'm going to go down through the edges, and I'm going to keep my eyes on my locators and try to find a little point or some grass. I might see something out there in my Panoptic out in front of the boat to throw at. But keep some areas out there where I can find something to throw at around wood cover or rocks or underwater structure or an underwater change in the bottom. That's what I'm looking for in the open water when I'm fishing a jig. It's an exactly really good bait to get because you get down on the bottom, you can fish deep, you can fish any depth you want. And when the water's cold and the fish are sluggish, a jig is obviously a great thing to get them. Plus a jig catch really big fish. I mean, you catch big fish on a jig, absolutely no doubt about that. But these are the type things that I'm looking for when I'm fishing a jig. I'm not necessarily in the cold water with a jig looking for fish that are going to go into spawn or staging in any way. I'm going to look for fish I'm going to look for fish that's there, and maybe they've been there a while, and I can go back a week or 10 days, and those fish will still be in those areas. That's the kind of areas I'm looking for. And we're going to fish some of these little areas like this, if we can catch one or two on a jig. Might find a little point, might find a big piece of brush down there or a log laying on the bottom that we might see with our live scope that we can throw around and catch a fish. I might be able to just catch them on the edges. If you'll notice that most of the time when I'm looking for fish, I'm looking around the edges of something, the edges of grass, the edges of trees, the edges of points. He's hung up. He's still on. He's still on there. I got him. This was right on the edge. That fish is right on the edge. Looks like a big fish. He is a big fish. I don't know how damaged my line is. Oh, good fish. That's the kind of fish you expect to catch right there on a jig. I better get him. My line got hung up down there, so it's kind of damaged a little bit, I believe. Oh, that is it right there. That is it. Half ounce. Lucky strike jig. Looky there. That fish is over 5 pounds, well over 5 pounds. Kind of fish you catch this time of the year, cold, open water. He was around that tree on the inside edge of this field. Beautiful, beautiful fish. He was in another tree down there that I couldn't see. I could see some extra stuff there on my live scope, but he was in a tree. So when I set the hook, oh my goodness. Throw it out there, pick your backlash out, and set the hook. That's the name of the game, isn't it? Throw it out there, pick your backlash out, set the hook. Oh my goodness. It's a nice one too. Dang right, he's a nice one. Dang right, he's a nice one. Look at that booger bear, will you? Golly. Oh, Jimmy. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look at that fish. Oh my goodness. Ah. What I'm looking for with a jig, obviously, is brush on the bottom and differences in the bottom contour in open water. That is a giant fish right there. Look at that fish. That's a giant. That's a 6 or 7 pound bass right there. That is a beauty. You talk about a healthy wintertime bass. That's a healthy wintertime bass right there. Now that fish was out on a point around some brush. All right, here's another bait. Here's another bait that is incredibly great open water bait for the cold water, and that's the old umbrella rig. This bait is so good, as a matter of fact, that you cannot use this bait. You cannot use this bait in BASS or Major League Fishing or FLW at the top level. You use it in some of their lower level tournaments. You cannot use it in their top level tournaments. That's just how dynamite this bait is. When they are biting this bait, when they're on this bait, it's almost impossible to beat. I mean, it's just almost impossible to beat. You just almost cannot catch them as well on anything else as you can this bait right here. It's just absolutely dynamite. And on this bait, it's just a matter of, there's a lot of different ways to fish it. But again, if you're going to get in the open water, one of the best things is finding schools of shad. If you got a lake that's got an awful lot of shad in it, find the schools of shad, find them with your locator, and go around and fish around on top of and underneath those shad. Now, if you got a good pan optics that can look out in front of the boat, you can see those shad, you can see where the fish are on top or below that thing, and you'll be able to catch a lot of really, really big fish this way. But it's just a dynamite way to catch really, really big fish. Now, I'm living pretty dangerously right here because I'm in these trees. There's a lot of trees that you can't see. It's not a very good bait at all to throw around the trees. Okay, here's the other thing I use in open water without a doubt is a deep diving crankbait. This is an American Original Deep Smoothie. Sometimes you even want to use something that go deeper than this. This is a bait that you can cover a lot of open water with, and I spend a lot of time on the points with it. I spend a lot of time just going down banks that are in between areas where the fish might be moving in to spawn. If I've got grass, I'm going to fish the bait over the top of the grass. It depends on the type of lake. Early in the year, lakes like 10 Killer, you get on a lot of good big chunk rock banks where you got them rocks about this big, and you can take these deep diving crankbaits and get out and try to catch fish on those in open water. But one of the things about a crankbait is that you're kind of limited by how deep it'll go. Now, sometimes you can use that to your advantage because you can You can get in a place where you got, say, grass or something that's 7 or 8 feet deep and fish a crankbait that'll go down 5 foot deep, and it doesn't ever get in the grass, but stays over on top of the grass. So you can use it to your advantage. But one of the things about a crankbait in trying to locate fish in open water is the fact that you can cover a lot of water with it. We're going to do that here for the next hour or so. We'll just cover a lot of water and see if we can catch a fish or two on this crankbait. It's a good thing, good way to catch them. It's probably, of the 5 baits we've talked about today, it's probably about one of the, I don't know if it's a number 3 or number 4 or number 5. You know, I guess it depends on the day. Some days it might be number 1. You're not ever going to catch them very often on all 5 baits I've talked about today. And there's other baits that are really good too to think about in fishing open water like we're fishing. Rattle baits are good, things like a big Hail Mary. Chatterbaits are good to use in open water. There's a lot of type baits you can use in open water. These 5 right here, if you'll try these 5 right here when you're fishing open water type areas, and when the water's cold, water like we've got it right now, it's actually down to 48 degrees. It got up to 51 today, but as that sun has gotten down closer to the horizon, the water's already started cooling off. It's that time of the year when the nights are going to be cold. It's going to be down in the 30s tonight, even though it was a beautiful, beautiful day. And we're going to just run some of this open water with this deep diving crankbait. I'm out in 19 or 20 foot of water right now. And I'm just going to run this open water and see if I can't run into some fish. And that's all you're trying to do with a crankbait. You're just trying to run into some fish out here. You might find a little area that has got a tree, one tree standing out there all by itself that you can't see except with your locators. You might find an area that's got a piece of grass sticking up. There's all kinds of things that could be down there. It could be a bridge culvert, could run into an old road bed. You know, you just want to pay attention to all that. But one of the things you're doing in open water with a crankbait is you are covering a lot of water. Okay, guys and girls, the key thing about open, cold water is don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of the open, cold water. I picked out 5 good techniques and 5 good lures to catch them. There are more. These are not the only things you can do it on. And really we caught them on 3 of the 5. We caught them on everything but my American Original Deep Smoothie, which I catch a jillion fish on. And of all things, an Alabama rig, an umbrella rig. That's usually a great, great bait for cold, open water. And those are the 2 baits that did not perform today. Spinnerbait we caught fish on. Oh, it's grass. Spinnerbait we caught fish on. That's a lot of grass. Spinnerbait we caught fish on. Jerkbait we caught fish on, and a jig. Without a doubt, you know, if you'd have been out here with me today and we was doing this, once we got to catch them as good as we caught them on a jig, that's a technique we'd use for today. And if we was out here trying to catch fish in a tournament, going to come out tomorrow, the next day, or a couple days from now and try to fish a tournament, we'd probably come out here and really concentrate on that jig. But that's the reason you want to have 4 or 5 different techniques to break down open water, 4 or 5 different lures, is to find out which one works the best. And it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to pick out 5 lures or 6 lures and catch them on every single one. Usually you're going to catch them on maybe only 1 or 2. But the key is to hit those different type areas that we talked about today, looking for areas where the fish are going to spawn, looking for areas that you got breaks in the bottom, different things in the bottom that fish can be around, and looking for openings in the grass. We talked about a lot of different things, probably a whole lot more than 5 techniques today. But those things, those 5 baits right there, and if you'll go and look the way that we've been looking today, in the course of the day, you're going to find out and you're going to figure out some fish. And once you figure them out, obviously you just duplicate that. But the key deal is early in the year when the water's cold, the fish are not going to be up in too much shallow water. Spinnerbait's a pretty good choice for today too, huh? Spinnerbait is a pretty good choice for today as well. Spinnerbait's caught a big fish or 2, and it's caught some smaller ones also. That's not a bad fish. That's a 14 or 15-inch fish. But you notice that I just laid the crankbait down, I picked it up and hadn't made many throws with the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is definitely a good choice. When the fish are not
up in that shallow water, and they're just not up in that shallow water yet. They're just not there. The water's too cold. They're going to be in the open water, and they're going to be big ones out there. Some of the biggest fish in the lake, a lot of those giant fish will never ever move to very shallow water. They'll spawn a lot deeper than most of the fish. So don't be afraid to fish the open water. Get out there and have you some fun. Try these different baits. Once you figure it out, bingo, you're in business. See you later, guys and girls.